you for the introduction. Thank you for the invite. I'm looking forward to a great discussion with John and Jesse and all of the guests on the line. I am from APTA, which is the American Public Transportation Association. I am the Vice President of Marketing and Communications. And as you might imagine, the conversation around sustainability, be it environmental, economic, societal sustainability, is near and dear to us as an industry. What I will say is I'll give a brief, broad overview of how we as an association, a trade association, is how the industry is sort of viewing and tackling sustainability. And as you might imagine, public transportation has been an early adopter of sustainable practices and clean technologies. This is sort of not a new foray for the industry into how to be more sustainable, how to move forward. The pandemic, of course, has exacerbated and accelerated a lot of what the industry has been doing. But with transportation sector generating the largest share of greenhouse gas emissions, we as an industry feel we have an obligation and an opportunity to address sustainability in a meaningful way, in a measurable way that resonates with communities around the nation and around the world, if you will. And during the past decade, especially in the last 2 years around the COVID-19 pandemic, many of the bus fleets from our agency members are already transitioning away from older fossil fuels. They're already moving to electric battery or hydrogen fuel or a hybrid of both. In some cases, it's 2 or 3 buses. In some, it's a smaller system that's been able to transition half of their fleet. And with the goal to try to keep up with the ambitious goals of 2030 by this administration and 2050 by those around the world to really greatly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, a lot of folks and agencies are testing and trying out low or no emission vehicles on light rails or trolleys or streetcars, depending on what mode or what multi-mode that they are involved with. And they're even trying green innovations in the way that they clean and maintain vehicles. A lot of that has come through these last 2.5 years in terms of reducing waste, saving water, saving electricity, as they try to maintain the cleanliness and the health and safety of their vehicles as they transport people to and from work and school and community activities. And it's not just reducing carbon emissions, and I know we're going to talk about this later. It's also making transit-centric communities that are cleaner, healthier, and more efficient, if you will. And I did mention this. The COVID-19 pandemic, of course, disrupted all of us, the world, the industry for us, but there were already things that our agencies were doing, that the industry was doing, adopting carbon neutral operating practices, clean energy technologies, trying to invest to the best of our ability in resilient infrastructure that can accommodate future natural or man-made crises. We've seen a lot of that with the New York City subway system. Just this past week in St. Louis, there was heavy rain and flooding, and it did some serious damage to the St. Louis metro system there, where they're estimating $18 to $20 million worth of repairs needed just from that one rainstorm a few days ago. And we're trying to make sure we increase access to communities that did not have access before, access to opportunities to try to create more equitable transit systems. There's a lot, and we'll talk about this, I think, as we do some of the questions in the panel discussion, reimagining systems from SEPTA in Philadelphia to the Los Angeles Metro to smaller rural systems that really make sure that they're going where the communities in need are and bringing them into the fold in ways that they have never been sort of accessed or able to commute before. And then the last thing is, we are trying to make our systems, public transportation, as convenient and as flexible and desirable as possible to give people alternatives. Yes, it would be great if we can reduce the amount of cars on the road. It is not just to reduce the amount of cars on the road, it's to provide that sort of opportunity and access and flexibility that as many people as possible can use transit for their needs, whatever those needs may be. And the big piece here is, in November of last year, the bipartisan infrastructure law was passed, otherwise known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and several other names that the White House and the administration have used over the course of the past few months. But that level of investment is vital to what we as an industry are trying to do. It's the highest level of investment that we've seen in this industry, and it's going to allow the industry to repair and replace and modernize aging facilities, which, if you've been on some of the legacy systems in our country, in Chicago CTA, the New York MTA, you know that they need some modernization than they have for years. So the state of good repair needs will be addressed by this new legislation, trying to expand service where they're needed most. And again, trying to be flexible, creative, find new technologies to make this more reliable and convenient. And in that regard, using this investment not just on physical infrastructure, so rail cars, new bus lines, new rail lines, it's how do we address racial and social equity by expanding access to opportunities? How do we drive the economic recovery of our country as we try to crawl out of this pandemic and hopefully move forward at a nice clip? And how do we implement new protections for passengers and public on our system side in terms of cybersecurity and attacks, and to our riders and commuters and those that use the system? How do we keep those cars healthy, safe, and secure moving forward? And so, sort of to wrap this all up, we at APTA and the industry as a whole, we think that public transportation can provide the essential elements for progress on all of these priorities. And this is what we've been focused on, obviously, over the course of many years and many decades. But with this new investment and the administration's focus on infrastructure, the focus on public transportation, the focus on climate and environment, we're trying to harness that opportunity and really make a huge inroads here in the coming weeks, months, and years, depending on how many battles we might have on Capitol Hill. So with that, I don't want to take up too much time, and I'm going to throw it back to you, Maury, and to our other panelists.
You bet. Let me ask one quick follow-up, TJ, because that's a lot, covered a lot of territory, right? You've everything from safety and protection to all the access issues. Let me ask just one follow-up. When we think about access, obviously, if something is going to be sustainable, then people have to be able to access it. And accessibility has so many dimensions to it. If you were to put your finger on what you think is the most important practical issues that have to be solved for with access right now, what are they?
It's reliability and frequency. And for any of us that live in Washington, D.C. and use WMATA, you know that the biggest problem, even if you have rail cars pulled off the system, physical issues, it's reliability and frequency on bus routes and on rail routes. And the access cannot be there if you do not have a reliable system that says it's going to be there when it needs to be and gets you to where it says you're going to go on time. And so, we talk around it a lot, but it really is that. It's reliability and frequency, and however you can get to that point, whether it's the investment in dollars or it's the investment in human capital, that's what needs to be done. We actually have two systems in Florida that are basically, they're piloting automated vehicles, very small. It's Jacksonville's Transit Authority and in Tampa Bay, the Pinellas Suncoast. And they probably hold 4 to 6 people. And right now they're doing testing on basically a mile-long straight track of, design, test, repeat. So the lather, rinse, repeat of this. But there's this realization and this need that down the road, you don't want to be left behind as an industry. So there already is this level of experimentation going on, and the initial results in a pilot program where they have put humans to ride up and down this 1 mile track, if you will, and the results have been, okay, we can see how this works. We have to go back to the drawing board and fine tune this, because it is a ways down the road where you're going to necessarily have a bus picking you up at your stop to take you to work that does not have a driver, does not have a human. However, I will say there's probably somebody in a control center who's going to have to learn a whole new job skill set to operate that vehicle. So there's that component of this as well, is sort of the transformation of what you think of when you think of a bus operator in the public transportation industry. Down the road, it's somebody who's probably operating an automated vehicle. But we're seeing a little bit of this. It's funny that it's in Florida because they probably don't mind testing things out when it's 75 and 80 degrees every day, and they can get on and off their automated vehicle if they need to. But it's, Doug, to your question, it's something that's already being sort of experimented with and fine-tuned. But I do think, in conversations you hear at a rail conference and other conferences, everyone realizes it's a ways down the road, but we do not want to be left behind. And you see examples of where you can meet in the middle. They're in Indianapolis, for instance. Indianapolis right now is doing a new bus rapid transit line that specifically runs straight through the core of Indianapolis, connecting low-income and disadvantaged communities. I forget if it's on the east or the west side of Indianapolis, through the city center to what would be the more outskirts suburban part of Indianapolis, because specifically in doing their research and their work, there was that need to connect an income, a low income and disadvantaged community to these other amenities that was laid to bear during the pandemic, that without transit, there was no way for communities to get from here to there. So Indianapolis is one city that is doing these bus rapid transit lines. I mentioned Philadelphia earlier, and I just wanted to bring it up again, because what they said in the last few months is we need to redesign our entire system. And that is the bus system, that is the rail system, and their commuter rail system, because those pieces weren't working together to give people access to work, job, sporting events, whatever it was. And it was really a teardown of, we've done things this way for so long, and it was made very clear over the course of 2.5 years, when only people that needed to ride rode, what we need to do. So commuter rail, for instance, the days of commuter rail being 7 to 10 in the morning and 5 to 8 at night, or whatever it would be in your specific area, you now need to rethink how your commuter rail line connects to regular frequent bus travel and regular frequent, say, rail or light rail travel, because there are gaping holes that are not serving anybody, and you have to kind of fix those inefficiencies. So, you do see when there's leaders like Mayor Gallego in Phoenix, who has really pushed for things, you can cut through the sort of policy morass that does exist in a lot of places. Los Angeles has done a lot with this, but it's not just larger cities. You do see rural and smaller communities. I wouldn't call Milwaukee rural, but smaller city sizes. Milwaukee themselves have tried to do bus rapid transit expansion specifically tied to transit-oriented development. So here is the bus line at the end of the line. Here is our new mixed use housing and retail space, connected by a bus to the other end is transit-oriented development or another hub. And so trying to connect what may be there, what needs to be there commercially and residentially. So, I have hope for it. You see a lot of it here. I live in Northern Virginia. You see a lot of attempts to build around and on top of the metro lines here in DC. And, I think to mix success, you have to be very careful with transit-oriented development to not force out the local residents that are there currently. And so you do see policy changes or policy implementation there where you have to make sure that you have carved out the space residentially or commercially for the communities that are already there. You cannot be pushing everybody out because you want to build $1 million condo on top of a metro stop. So there's a lot to consider, but I think city governments, I think transit agencies, NACTOs and the League of Cities, I think there's, in recent years, I think there's been a bigger push to make sure everyone is talking to each other to get to the end results that will help us kind of build and prevent what could be a next pandemic that again shows that we've missed the opportunity to connect people and communities. And by right here, it's the connectivity that transportation provides to build communities. So connectivity and communities, I think, would be the way to message. And to John's point, sound bites don't work, but a tagline like that might work at a level that really resonates, because community means different things to different people, but it means something usually in a positive way that drives positive change. And, connectivity, to me, all of the things we've talked about here, all of these different possible technologies, these ways to rethink transportation, it's all about connectivity. And, as technology develops, we have to make sure we stay more connected and not less connected.